Good afternoon. My name is Manuel Collazo, Minister of Stewardship and Development for the National Christian Churches and Ministries Network. Today we're going to be discussing some of the aspects of managing the church. In other words, we're going to be looking at documentation. Documentation is extremely important for us to be able to capture the details of any financial transaction, be it a deposit, a check, a benevolence check, all donations to the church, and what is involved in capturing that information. The details of a transaction is what makes the transaction auditable. What that means is that the transaction carries all of the necessary documentation to meet generally accepted accounting practices, GAAP, in order to detail what happened. Who approved the check? What was the check requested for? Who made the request? Who approved the request? When does the check need to be done by? To what address does it need to be shipped? All of that information is necessary to properly detail the transactions we do at church on a regular basis. Spreadsheets alone give part of the story, but they don't provide the entire story. Our goal is that 6 months from now, when we review the books, we can look at any transaction created from this moment forward and have a detailed accounting of what happened. So, without further ado, we're going to start our training. Thank you. Our agenda for today is going to cover several items. Accounting basics about GAAP and documentation, vouchers. We're going to review our cash management procedures, the deposit form, the check request, and its variants, the petty cash and benevolent forms. And we're going to go into QuickBooks to understand the accounting system that's going to be receiving these transactions. That includes adding deposits. We're going to review what the chart of accounts is. We're going to take a look at reports. We're also going to talk about inurement, and then we'll conclude at that point with a summary. So, hope you enjoy the training. So let's talk about GAAP. What is GAAP? Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, or GAAP, are standards that encompass the details, complexities, and legalities of business and corporate accounting. The Financial Accounting Standards Board, FASB, uses GAAP as the foundation for its comprehensive set of approved accounting methods and practices. U.S. law requires businesses releasing financial statements to the public and companies publicly traded on stock exchanges and indices to follow GAAP guidelines. GAAP incorporates the following 10 concepts. The 10 GAAP principles, in essence, cover our accounting procedures and regulations. The principle of regularity. GAAP-compliant accountants strictly adhere to established rules and regulations. The principle of consistency. Consistent standards are applied throughout the financial reporting process. The principle of sincerity. GAAP-compliant accountants are committed to accuracy and impartiality. The principle of permanence methods. Consistent procedures are used in the preparation of all financial reports. The principle of non-compensation. All aspects of an organization's performance, whether positive or negative, are fully reported with no prospects of debt compensation. The principle of prudence. Speculation does not influence the reporting of financial data. The principle of continuity. Asset valuations assume the organization's operations will continue. The principle of periodicity. Reporting of revenues is divided by standard accounting periods, such as fiscal quarters or fiscal years. The principle of materiality. Financial reports fully disclose the organization's monetary situation. The principle of utmost good faith. All involved parties are assumed to be acting honestly. Why is GAAP important? GAAP compliance makes the financial reporting process transparent and standardizes assumptions, terminology, definitions, and methods. External parties can easily compare financial statements issued by GAAP-compliant entities and safely assume consistency which allows for quick and accurate cross-company comparisons. Because GAAP standards deliver transparency and continuity, they enable investors and stakeholders to make sound, evidence-based decisions. The consistency of GAAP compliance also allows companies to more easily evaluate strategic business options. If you'd like to read more about GAAP, you can do so at accounting.com, resources, GAAP. QuickBooks Online, QBO, the Cash Management Procedures forms, completing and filing, documenting QuickBooks Online. Even if there's endless documentation, it will be impossible to know what a man thought inside his own mind. Irving Stone. Documentation. Any accountant, bookkeeper, and auditor knows very well that without documentation, it is impossible to verify anything. For us in the non-profit world, it is even harder. As stewards of what God has placed in our care, we must strive to have adequate written documentation of everything we do. As caretakers for the government, we need to make sure we have adequate written documentation of everything we handle at the church. That leads us to talk about our cash management procedures. Whether receiving a donation or paying an expense, we're handling cash. In order to document all income and expense transactions, the National Christian Churches and Ministries Network, also known as NCCMN, or simply the network, has developed a series of procedures to handle both income and expense transactions. These forms serve as a documentation and communication vehicle for all transactions. Let's look at some examples of documentation. The weekly giving envelope in a church is a perfect example of documentation. We should encourage our donors to not only give generously, but to use their giving envelopes or the modern electronic variations of these. The envelope or the giving report from an electronic system is our first line of defense to having adequate documentation. The envelope needs to be kept for a minimum of 7 years to document the donation. Yet the IRS could go back an additional 3 years and look. So we recommend to keep records back up to 10 years. Auditable documentation. Documents need to be auditable. But what does that mean? What is an auditable document? Any document that passes the rigor of an audit is considered to be an auditable document. If it can be verified, substantiated, and properly documented, the document has passed the audit. Let's examine what that looks like from the perspective of a bank deposit. The typical deposit ticket has enough information for the bank to do its job. The problem is, it doesn't have enough information for us. So what we need is additional information about the deposit. As part of the information we need is exactly how much cash was deposited. How was it broken down? How many hundreds, 50s, 20s, 10s, 5s, and yes, 2s and 1s. We need to have this to ensure that we have two things: full transparency and supporting documentation. The deposit voucher is designed for churches. It captures information that we can use in insurance claims if the deposit is lost. It provides information on what we care about. Was the deposit for? What ministries were contributed to? And who made the contributions? This is a sample form for Journey Church. If you see, it has the date that the deposit occurred, when was it deposited, what the breakdown of the funds were, down to the coins. How many checks were in the deposit? What's the total of those checks? And what is it for? Tithes, offerings, building fund, or other ministries that are being blessed, well, it is documented in this form. So entering this data into QuickBooks is as simple as following the form. Even when 97% of the donations for Journey arrive electronically, there is still a 3% that come in cash form. So this form is designed for that. The back of the form provides additional space for detailing the deposits for congregations that wish to do so. In this case, we're seeing a form that was filed by a church in August of 2016 and sent us this information about the deposit. The total of the deposit was $13.14, but it was broken down by tithes, offerings, a building fund, and benevolence funds. And it is signed by who deposited and who counted the money. This is information that is crucial to the insurance companies should this deposit be lost. How can you lose a deposit? As simple as leaving it in a cab while going to the bank. How do we know what it was for? This supplementary form allows us to detail what checks or what envelope gave what for what purpose. This allows us to document who is giving what for what, and it allows us to use this information to enhance our deposit form. To summarize, it's not enough just to count the money. It's not enough just to make a deposit. We need to properly document what we have done and have a standard document to properly feed our accounting systems. As any church document, the deposit form should be filed for a period of 7 years. Check request voucher. I've got to get this out of the way. Everybody will hate this form. They will not like you for having them fill out this form, and they will call the pastor and complain because you're making them fill out this form. But they will love this form if there's a problem, an audit, or we need to know who approved the check. The check request form is very basic in its components. What it's asking us for is, what is this check for? Who does it need to be made to? What's the address of the person or company we're sending the check to? What date is it required by? What is the check amount? And it asks us to fill a brief description as to what we're doing. The authorization section basically says who prepared the form, who asked for the money, and who authorized the money is the second line. From the accounting section, we have what is the PO number or the GL account number we're applying this expense to, what is the description of that, and what is the amount. This could have several items because if you go, for example, to buy at Publix and you buy for multiple activities, different ministries are impacted. So that's why you have multiple lines. The verification says, did you add everything up? Is there a tax exemption attached to it? Did we receive the service we were paying for? Do we have adequate support? Is that a 1099 required for this form? And did we receive the items? And the paid information is basically the date and the check number where it was made. For the general ledger information is when was it entered into the system and who signed for it. And any additional comments. Again, what we're trying to do is document what is this check for. It has a cousin. The cousin of the check request is the petty cash voucher. This one is as important, if not more, due to the simple fact that it deals with cash. Notice that there's a disclaimer on this one. It says that if you do not return proper documentation, you will get a 1099 from the church for your taxes. Because if we give you money, and it has to be reported to the IRS if you are benefiting from it. The way to avoid this is please bring a receipt for the expense of petty cash. It has another cousin. The cousin of the check request voucher is the benevolent request voucher. Benevolent requests or love offerings is something that the church has invented. To the IRS, when somebody receives money, it's income. It doesn't matter how it gets to him, it's income. To document this giving event, we need to capture Who is the person that asked for the request? Who prepared the form? Who confirmed that this needs exist? And who authorized the distribution? It is important that we use the 3-signature system when working with love offerings and this type of request. We need to demonstrate to the IRS in an audit that a need was indeed verified and it existed and it was authorized by at least 3 persons in the body of the church. Why QuickBooks Online? One of today's premier accounting products in the United States with an install base of over 2 million users is QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks is accessible securely over the internet from any device, be it an iPhone, an iPad, a PC, or a Mac. Desktop, laptop, all you need is an internet connection to access your books. Premier Payroll Services allow you to run your own payroll or choose to have QuickBooks run it for you automatically and handle all of the necessary filing. User access is controlled by the system, and users are granted access based on their needs. The right level of access avoids the issue of posting the wrong item. Report-only access is always available and free of charge, and you can have as many users that need report capabilities enabled on the system. QuickBooks offers a full audit trail, so any user using the system will be visible to the accountant who can monitor what is being changed and when it was changed. The accountant also has the power to reverse transactions in an easy documented manner, which will also be captured in the audit trail. The invitation. QBO always starts with an invitation. Users are invited to access QBO via an invitation. The user ID in QuickBooks Online is your email address. Your accountant will use your email to create your QBO account, and an invitation from the system will be sent to your email address. Please don't ask us to set up a password for you, because that is something you will have to do once you receive the invitation. The level of access is set by the accountant when he creates the account. So what will I see when I go into QuickBooks? Your screen will probably look like this one, where we have our dashboard here for a particular church. We blanked out the name to protect the innocent, but you'll have an automatic profit and loss that will tell you what the status of the church is. You will see the expenses for the last 30 days. Invoices that haven't been paid will also be shown on the system. Balances of bank accounts are shown automatically in the dashboard. QuickBooks is designed as an accounting system for corporations. That's why you see a box called Sales, which is basically translates to donations. The menu on the left allows us access to different parts of the system, such as banking, sales, cash flow, expenses, payroll, reporting, taxes, mileage, and accounting for the chart of accounts. So you can see if all the different options are available through the menu on the left-hand side of your screen. Here we are seeing the banking screen for this particular church. If you notice, it has several bank accounts. The one highlighted in blue on the right-hand side is their checking account. Transactions that have come in from the bank are there available for review. You have a categorize button near the center that allows you to see what has already been categorized for the system, and transactions that are excluded for whatever reason are also in a separate tab. The numbers in the screens for the accounts show the number of transactions that are pending to be classified. For example, the savings account has 2, the ministerial savings account has 1, the checking has 4, and the Capital One credit card here has 115 transactions that need to be classified. The menu is available always in QuickBooks when you enter. Most of what you need to do in QBO will come out of the menu. In QBO, there will be multiple options as to how to get to a place or perform a task. the menu always takes you where you need to go. Let's explore some of those options. The dashboard, or home, is the main screen that allows you to get information from the church and QuickBooks. Dashboard brings you always back to the home screen in QBO. This works in the app or browser versions of QBO. So if you got lost within QuickBooks and you need to go back, all you need to hit is the dashboard button on the left hand side, and it will always take you back to the beginning. You can use Banking View to view what is your current bank activity. A summary of your bank account is located in the home screen, the dashboard, on the upper right. This again is a summary. It displays the balance of the accounts. It also shows you if there are any pending transactions that you have arrived from the bank but are yet to be posted. We recommend that you connect your bank account to QuickBooks Online. It will save you time if you're able to get a feed from the bank as the transactions arrive there, and hit your account will be available in QuickBooks. Reconciliations will all be simpler. When you click on the number 1, in this case that we have here, you notice here there's a 1, a new screen will appear with greater detail. Let's take a look at it. The detail of the bank account now shows us balances in both the QuickBooks and in the bank, and it also shows us what the transaction that just arrived, the number 1 there, in this case is an interest posting that we can add. If you notice that we are still in the bank and credit cards, and it shows us several items. Transactions that have arrived from the bank appear only for review. That's what we're seeing here. If the action is selected, then the transaction is added and posted to QuickBooks. So let's take a look at the QuickBooks for Journey Church. We're in the accountant mode, so we can see other churches, but this is yours. So what we're seeing here from the dashboard is what's called the business overview. This is my preferred view, because it allows me to see quickly what has transpired in the last 30 days. I can see that we've had a net income for the last 30 days, the total income that has come in, the total expenses, the number of accounts that need to be reviewed on each one of these categories. Notice that these are active links. If we click on them, we will go to the screen to do those. We'll do that in a second. We also have this little pie chart that allows us to review our expenses for the last 30 days. And we can see human resources. This is very normal for a church. Is one of the highest expenses. We can also see that we've had as client those are transactions that need to be checked. We have building funds, and we also have everything else. Here's the bank account screen, which goes as a summary. And if you notice, we have mentions of legacy savings, the Journey Church account, the Bill.com money out clearing, and we can also connect additional accounts as they become active. We have income within the last 365 days, and we have sales, or basically income, also within the next 30 days. We have the also this quick link for other options that are available within QuickBooks. But let's take a look at bank accounts in this case. So I can get there through multiple ways. I can go to banking here on the menu, or I can just hit the bank accounts area, and for example I would go in to take a look at this account. If you notice, the highlighted in blue is the particular account I'm using at this time. Again, the highlighted in blue account is the account I'm looking at this moment in time. The number 3 are transactions that are basically need to be reviewed and for the record. And we also have the Journey Church account, who has transactions that need to be categorized, that we see here. This area, the screen, also has what we've seen. These are the for review, where we have 320 accounts, this is the categorized view. In the categorized view, we see transactions that have been applied already. There's a rules screen that allow us to define particular rules as to what to do with a particular transaction. For example, here's a rule that has been created. It's currently disabled. It's not working. That if it contains the description of check, set the category to Ask My Accountant. If the description is Amazon, it also places it in a particular bucket, Ask My Client. But if it's from PushPay, for example, we see that the expense for PushPay is set up for dues and subscription. So this happens automatically. We are also able to automatically add this transaction whenever it shows up by flipping the switch. And these are basically the rules that apply for the different transactions. Once again, we go back to banking to look at the account. Any transaction can be looked at to see more details. For example, this one is a purchase that occurred in Amazon, but we need more information to be able to fully categorize it. That's why it's placed on this Ask My Client bucket, which allows us to then take more time and be able to review the transaction and properly categorize it. In summary, QuickBooks Online offers multiple navigation features that allow you to reach a transaction in different ways. Home or dashboard is always the quickest way to get back to the beginning screen. Bank Summary will always provide summary information regarding your bank accounts, and the number indicates the transactions that are ready for review and action. Adding transactions is as simple as pushing a button, literally. The button that we will be using for new transactions is called the New button. It allows us to do bank deposits, transfers, journal entries, pay down a credit card. Multiple functions are hidden under this. Let's take a look. We're back in the dashboard here for Journey Church, and what I'd like you to see now is a feature, one of the buttons on the menu, which is called the New button. This New button over here allows us to create transactions directly. For example, if I wanted to create a deposit manually, let's just say on a Sunday we have a deposit and we're about to make it to the bank. Before we leave, we can go to New, and it opens up. It gives us all these options as to what we can do. And one of the options we have is here, bank deposit. So what this does, it will open up a screen to allow us to do the bank deposit that we just created and documented. And remember, we will be working from our voucher. So in here, we can go in here and say, I made this deposit to the Journey Church account. The deposit was made on a particular date. Let's say it was on the 15th. And we basically can come in here and categorize where this money came from. And let's say it's this is Tithes and Offerings account, and it is basically cash deposit. And let's say is, for argument's sake, $500. The class is something we'll be using soon to be able to categorize further the details of the transaction. The memo, we can basically say this is Sunday cash offering. And in the attachments, we would use that form that we created, the deposit voucher, and add it in here. And the way we can do that is basically by clicking here and selecting the file. And let's say I'm going to go to my OneDrive to look for that for my NCCMN. And we're going to look for your file, which is under Church Members, Journey Church. And we're going to say we have the deposit form here. We're going to upload it. And now the form is uploaded, and when we look at it, we will be able to see it. And that's the deposit form we're doing on this example. And this allows the deposit to be ready. Now let's say that there were multiple categories on the deposit form. We could come in here, select the second category. Let's say we have a designated for missions, and we received for that a check. And the check had a number, and it was for $100. And I want you to see something real neat. Once we do that, the deposit amount automatically recalculated for what we were entering, so we would be able to see the entire transaction. As we saw before on the demo, the new button is a very powerful option that breaks down menus for receiving pledges, estimates, recording expenditures, recording a check that we're about to do, enter bills, pay bills. It allows us to run the payroll. It also gives us the ability to run a bank deposit, a transfer, or a journal entry. So it gives us a lot of power on a very compact button. The new menu is one of the most powerful features of QuickBooks Online. It allows you to create multiple transaction types in an easy and consistent manner. Entering transactions as they occur and using the system to create transactions saves time on reviewing them later as they arrive from the bank. Remember, the bank knows the date it would receive the transaction and how much it was for, but very little else. Pre-entering this information always saves time for later. So let's talk about the chart of accounts. What is a chart of accounts? In the accounting world, General Ledger Chart of Accounts is the main scaffolding for a corporation's accounting system. It is the structure that allows the corporation to work and provides the framework to classify income and revenue, expenses and expenditures. We track for repeatable events, and we try to avoid being super specific if it is not a periodic event. Periodic specific event tracking can be done by dates and not necessarily by an account. An example would be the 2016 Women's Retreat versus Women's Retreat, with transactions posting in 2016. The chart of accounts is also known as the COA. It is very flexible. The COA can be customized within certain parameters to reflect the way the organization works. The COA can have account numbers to help structure the accounts so they follow a logical order. If you choose not to use account numbers, the reports will be organized following accounting best practices and in alphabetical order. Let's talk navigation. We get to the COA by using the menu system. The COA is located under Accounting. Changes to the COA, add changes or deletions, are considered a transaction, and it is logged in the audit log. So we will find COA under Transactions. Chart of Account is the last option on the Transactions menu. As you can see, I'm back on the dashboard on Business Overview. So we're going to look for the Chart of Accounts. And as you notice, as I traverse the menu is quite long here. We can go to Accounting, and then we'll see Chart of Accounts. The Chart of Accounts again has account numbers, and it classifies the account by the type. So if you notice, we have a name for the account. I'm going to try to scroll down here, and you'll see that there's a type associated to it. For example, here we start the revenue accounts. There's type and offerings designated, and in here we see our next screen of accounts, For example, here we have accounts associated to human resources, 5,000, to buildings, 5,100, administrative expenses and operating, 5,200, connections, ministry, programming, events, and if you notice, we have the Ask My Client account, purchases, and that's the last of the screen. You have a total of 168 accounts on the chart of accounts. This, of course, can be printed. Again, the chart of accounts type allows us to categorize our COA accounts following the best and recommended accounting practices or principles. In the previous screen, when we saw all account types have two categories, a type and a detail type. Example of this will be bank, detail type will be checking or savings. The important thing to remember is that an account has two types, a general and a detail type. Generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP, allows us to have a structure that we can follow with a certain degree of clarity across different businesses. For this reason, financial accounting relies on these GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, to be able to categorize our items on the system. GAAP compliance derives from tradition and entity report or your real-time accounting information. The prepared auditor must indicate whether or not the information contained within the statements complies with GAAP. What accounts to have? There are some accounts that are provided by default due to GAAP. Assets, liability, equity, revenue, and expenses are present in all chart of accounts. How we organize below these general categories is pretty much up to us. There are several areas we recommend to allow for clearer reporting. Let's start with the income and revenue. In the case of church nonprofit revenue, it is important to make up a distinction due to the fact that a church could end up having income that is not nonprofit, in other words, taxable income. When an income is not related to the main business practices of an organization, it is considered unrelated business income, or UBIT. This causes us to report, file, and pay taxes on UBIT income. On the example you see on the right, you will notice that there is a 1,000 donations as the main revenue account. That's the one at the top. Notice that the account is revenue, but specifically nonprofit revenue. That's the detail type for the account. There are other accounts under it, such as tithe, offering, building fund, benevolence, mission, etc. This allows the church to track the income it received from different categories. Something similar happens in the expense accounts. We organize the expenses or expenditures in several groups to better understand the church performance. The ones we normally suggest are administrative type expenses, payroll or compensation, and ministry expenses. When an unclassified account comes into the system, we need a placeholder for it. These accounts are generally referred to as unclassified accounts, and we have one for revenue, income, and we have one for expenditures, expenses. The purpose is to book the income or expenses until it can be properly categorized. It's like a holding account. If the system is used properly, these should be rarely utilized. Getting to the information. One thing is entering information into a system, but how do we get useful data out of it, useful information? We're all used to seeing reports. We see them printed. Have you ever wondered what is that number made of? Well, with QuickBooks Online reports, this takes new meaning. Reports are not just static pieces of paper. They are dynamic research tools that allow us to see data like we've never seen it before. This will mean a different way of reporting. Once again, we go back to our familiar menu. In this case, it's blue on the left of the screen. In this menu, the sixth selection is Reports. You'll notice it there. As before, this will take us to the report screen, but that is not the only way to get reports. Let's explore some other options. Okay, so let's take a look at reports. Now we have the report screen is open. We got here again through the menu Reports and clicked on the report screen. And we see now all of our standard reports. So we have some favorites here. We have the statement of activity and a statement of financial position. What are those? If this was a for-profit organization, we would be seeing profit and loss and balance sheet. But as this is a non-profit one, we're seeing statement of activity and statement of financial position. Again, QuickBooks is dynamic, so we just click on the name. That will immediately generate the report that we're seeing here. The defaults are for a total only of last month, and we notice it says 701 to 731 for the period. Active rows only, and we can compare it to another previous period. For example, we could go comparing it to the prior year and have it give us what the dollar change was and what the percentage of change was. Now we can run that report. And here we have July of 2022 compared to July of 2021, the prior year. The change is listed here, and the percentage of change is listed here. You notice the gross profit went from $161,655 to $314,000. That's a 94% change, or $153,000 difference between the years. When we look at the expenditures, we see something similar. We will see all that information available there. So this is a comparative report that shows net revenue of $114,000 versus $22,000 for the previous year, a $408 positive difference between both years for this month. Now, comparing month is a tricky business. If you compare just the month, you may end up with a situation where one year may have more Sundays than another. So what we normally like to do, instead of last month, we like to look at last quarter. This is a quarter from April 1 through 6/30. Total only compared to prior year. So once we run that report, what this gives us is an actual comparison of the same number of income days. The Sundays are the same on both. So now we have a better comparison. For the April to June period 2022 versus April to June period 2021, we see that the change was $342,000, or 77% higher on this year to the prior. Same thing will happen here. When we keep going down, we'll see it by area, and we'll see that expenditures went up because obviously we had more activity versus a year before. But here we have the net revenue is higher than the prior year by 227%. This gives us a very good tool to measure our performance. However, we also have a tool here called Performance Center. Performance Center gives us a different view of the different activities. For example, we can obviously we can have a full tour of the Performance Center here, but here gives us charts that are very important. For example, expenses by time, revenue by time. And notice that the period here is this year to date. So we can change that and say the fiscal year, or the fiscal year to last month, this year to last month. But here we're going to leave it this year to date. Again, it provides us operating investments, investment activities, finance activities for the cash flow, current ratio by time. All kinds of statistics are available here at your touch. If we go back to the reports, something that we can take a look at. Again, we're going to be looking at that statement of activity again. And we're going to go back to last quarter. We're going to leave the comparison off for now. Because what I wanted you to show you is that this is not just a static report that we print. In here, we're able to take a look at, for example, what came in tithes and offerings. And in here, we can see the detailed deposit of what composed those transactions and when they occurred. Again, this is available just by touching the amount. So we want to see what these were. We just click on the amount, and it will take us to that. So this gives us the ability to examine down to a detailed transaction of a particular deposit that occurred and where did it come from. And here's all of that information coded into the system. So again, back deposits occurred in the system and are captured by QuickBooks to provide a full detailed report of the performance of the church at a particular point in time. Inurement. Believe it or not, inurement is a dirty word when dealing with 501c3 organizations. Basically, here we see the IRS screen on their website as to and their definition of inurement or private benefit. In charitable organizations, we should not have a private benefit of from a nonprofit organization. So we need to be really careful to avoid situations that could lead to inurement. Self-remuneration in the nonprofit environment. One of the most important areas in the life of a nonprofit is to guarantee that inurement is not taking place. The IRS will be looking for any evidence in an audit to see if any members of the organization is evading taxes by using the umbrella of the nonprofit organizations and improperly receiving compensation. You remember why our friend Alfonso Capone went into jail? That's Al Capone, if you don't know him by his full name. It was for tax evasion. Even though he had committed several murders and illegal trafficking under him, the only crime proven was that one, tax evasion. We can cite many examples where well-intended ministers, church secretaries, treasurers are serving prison time for not doing the paperwork correctly. Nobody says you don't get reimbursed, but we need to document the who, what, when, and where the expense was, who made it, and who approved it. The inurement provision forbids the use of income or assets of a tax-exempt organization to directly or indirectly unduly benefit an individual or other person that has a close relationship with the organization or is able to exercise significant control over the organization. The big issue on inurement is that the appearance of it is enough to trigger an audit. It is expressly prohibited by law. Examples of what we could consider inurement are income or assets of a tax-exempt organization to directly or indirectly unduly benefit an individual. A check cashed by the pastor for the reimbursement to somebody else. Any type of income that is not declared or considered a self-remuneration situation. Compensation for any item without the receipts to justify it. Example is a check made for gas or cell phone, but no expense report or bill is produced. Remember that the appearance of inurement is enough to trigger an audit. So it's the individual that gets into trouble, right? So the pastor gets into trouble, but the church is okay, right? Unfortunately, no. An audit that has findings can trigger penalties of $25,000 per finding. Threw away the envelopes because they were taking too much space? A finding, $25,000 penalty. 5 cash checks not reported in W-2. 5 findings, total penalties, $125,000. Total penalties for an audit, $150,000, plus the loss of the 501c3. Oh no, 501c3 is gone? Your property is now subject to property taxes. You can easily see how a ministry can be destroyed by an inurement. To summarize, document, document, document. Your mission in life is to keep clear records of all transactions, events, paper trails possible. Spend church money? Get a receipt. Fill out an expense report. Need money? Fill out the proper forms and file them correctly. Check requests for checks, petty cash vouchers for cash, benevolence for benevolence gifts. Document all deposits properly. Keep documents filed for 7 years. Use QuickBooks Online and classify your checks and deposits properly. We hope you have enjoyed this training. I know we have covered a lot of material. That's why we wanted to record it for you so you have it for future reference. If you have any questions, any concerns, please send an email to info@nccmn.org and we'll be more than glad to find you the answer for the question you have. God bless you, God keep you, and may He shine His face upon you and give you peace. God bless.